everyone who's joining us on Instagram Live, and a big hello to everyone who's on the live Zoom call. This is our Daily Power Pep Talk. So we've got about 15 minutes together to learn as much wisdom as we can from Loren Trlin. If you've got questions throughout, feel free to send them through on Instagram or on the Zoom comments, and we will try and get to them. But Loren, welcome. Thanks for joining us. How's the morning been so far?
Oh, it's been incredible. Thank you for having me. It's perfect blue skies here in Melbourne. I've already done my meditation, so I'm ready for this conversation.
You're ready to go. You're ready to go. Well, let's just jump on into it. Talk me through the best way to maintain an abundant mindset right now, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so the biggest thing we can do at the moment is manage our uncertainty. So one of the two core fundamental human needs that we have are the needs of certainty and uncertainty. And at the moment, uncertainty has gone through the roof. And so we need to manage that through certainty practices. What that looks like on a really, really practical level is daily ritual, bringing back our daily ritual that most people have probably lost if they're not going to work anymore, if their whole schedule's been thrown out. So we want to bring some of that back. So for me, morning meditation practice is a non-negotiable. A simple practice like that keeps me certain, brings me groundedness, and then having some form of schedule really, really helps. And all of this helps to manage the uncertainty. And as soon as we're managing the uncertainty, we can bring ourselves out of fight or flight mode. And then we can start to get creative, start to think outside the box, start to come up with ideas for how we can potentially solve our problems. So yeah, that's the first piece of the puzzle.
So maybe I should put my lipstick on because I haven't done that today. So that's a good ritual that I can because yeah, I feel like a lot of people are working remotely and they're working from home and they're not, cycling or walking or getting the subway or the bus or driving to work, right? They're stuck at home. And so I think probably a lot of people are making excuses, I know I am, for the reasons that I haven't created a ritual and that I'm not sticking to it. I wrote one down. I did it for 2 days and then I haven't been sticking to it. So what are some really great ways that we can make it a habit, genuinely utilize this time to build up a daily habit practice?
Yeah, so make it fun. We forget that we get to make it fun. I actually rearranged my entire home office a couple of days ago to shift the energy around, to make it a place that felt really, really inviting. And a ton of my clients have done this because all of a sudden that corner of the house that wasn't really looked at ever has become a home office. So that's a great way. Humans love to have a purpose and something practical to do. So if that means that you just have to create an office space for yourself that's really, really inviting, or a meditation space or a space where you can relax on your own, take the time to do that, even if it takes a couple of days to do that. So fun is really, really, really important. And also being curious, bringing back an energy of curiosity, asking yourself I wonder what it would look like if I was to go do this. I wonder what the next version of me requires for this next phase of my life that we are all entering as human beings. I wonder how, now that I have the opportunity to completely change my life in many respects, I wonder what I want to invite in for the next phase of my life. And maybe that's something as practical and simple as more fun, more laughter, less stress. We've been very stressed out as a collective for a very, very long time. More ease, more simplicity. And so we should definitely spend some time reflecting on that, because that's why we're having this experience at the moment.
And so for people who, I think a lot of people haven't been able to create the headspace to make a home office. We had an email this morning from someone who's homeschooling 3 children, and she and her partner both have, fairly intense jobs. So I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of just feeling overwhelmed. And I totally hear you on finding the curiosity and making the space beautiful. But practically for people who feel that's just not an option for them, what are some ways that people can kind of really slow down and create that space even amidst all of the kind of, ups and downs that are happening right now?
Yeah, and so it's a really good point, because we all have time though. If we're not commuting anymore, everyone has 15 minutes. And so even if it's the small act of before I actually meditate before I get out of bed so that I don't have any excuses. And if that means that I just get up 15 minutes earlier or get out of bed 15 minutes later, the great thing is no one's chasing a bus or a subway at the moment in order to be able to do that. Then we need to create non-negotiables in our life. And so part of it is that it's not really a matter of time, it's a matter of prioritization. And I would suggest that anyone that, despite the fact, I've got a lot of friends that have like 3 kids hanging off them at the moment, and I know it's like wild out there, that daily groundedness practice needs to become a non-negotiable, not just for yourself, but you need to give it a higher purpose. If it feels like you can't justify that for yourself, justify it for your family. Because your kids will benefit from you having 15 minutes to yourself to either like sit in the bathtub or have a quick meditation, even if it means like journaling or taking a bit of time to tidy up your space. Everyone benefits from it. So if you're feeling any guilt is always a sign that I am doing something wrong. Tell a different story around it. And that's it. We're just storytellers, right? So if the story is that I'm a terrible parent, tell a better story. Tell a story that this makes me a better parent, to ease some of that guilt and any concern we might have around, being able to give that time to ourselves, because it's really fundamental.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think what I'm hearing you say is that like it's an excuse or it's a story we're telling ourselves if we're not making the time for it. And I actually read something on Twitter this morning. I'm trying to cut back on Twitter. It is an awful addiction for those of you who are like me and suffer from it. But the woman from the main character in House of Cards, for anyone who's seen it, she put out a tweet that's like been retweeted like 4,000 times or something. And it essentially said, I guess I can stop telling myself that these are all the things that I'd do if I had time, right? Because we now all have the time. And I don't know about you, but my to-do list is still pretty bloody long, sadly. So that's obviously not due to a lack of capacity or time to do it, but due to the priorities that I'm setting.
And, I had to actually revisit my to-do list a couple of days ago and look at it and be like, realistically, does half of this stuff need to be on here? And the answer is no, really. And so this is actually a great time. Like, think about it. Collectively, we've been asked to stop, pause, and reflect, whether we realize it or not, whether we're still, if we're still in panic mode, that's totally fine. It's a very normal response, but we are actually being asked to stop, pause, and reflect. And it's the perfect time before the pace lifts up again, which it inevitably will, for us to ask ourselves, is this actually important? Is this necessary? And is this going to be relevant to my life 12 months from now, 5 years from now? If it's not, take it off the to-do list. And so, yeah.
No, well, I'm just going to say, like, is this, I just want to acknowledge the people out there who are really stressed right now and who have lost their jobs and who have family members who are sick. Like, it's, I just want to send compassion and empathy to you, because, I really appreciate and I can empathize that this must be an incredibly challenging time for a lot of people, and particularly businesses who are kind of struggling and require the economy to be open. Do you think, Loren, that there is merit in people as much as possible kind of reframing this away from a negative and maybe towards an opportunity, even for people who are kind of going to find that hard to get their head around if their businesses has had to shut or they've had to sack staff this week,
Completely. And it's a really good point. So that's like the next phase in all of this. Once we have settled, and so I don't advocate pushing too much onto an individual because whatever they're experiencing is incredibly valid. So if you're feeling incredibly stressed out at the moment and all of that, completely valid. But then when we reach the point where we have come to accept our circumstances, we then have 2 options. We either continue the way that hasn't been working for us, or we find a new way. And so that's a really important aspect of this whole journey, is that what's going to be required from so many of us, and I went through this in 2011, I went through my own personal family tragedy, and my family nearly lost everything, and I went through a severe amount of stress for a good 18 months. And so what emerged from that was that I had to completely recreate myself and to create a whole new set of beliefs around the stories that I was telling myself that no longer served me. So this is actually an awesome opportunity, because once again, we're meaning-making machines. We're powerful storytellers. So the question becomes, am I going to tell a story that's going to lead me to an outcome that I don't want? And this can be incredibly difficult to wrap your head around, because the story feels so convincing. The fear feels so convincing, right? Or we can tell a better story that says, actually, this is just a part of my hero's journey, and I know that I have the resourcefulness, the capacity, the love and support to always find a way. And that was one really big thing that I realized back in 2011, was that, regardless of what life threw at me, I had the ability to decide that I was on a hero's journey, And I got to, every time I came across a belief, which might be that you're a failure, you're not capable, you're not going to make it through this, I had the opportunity to tell a better story. So this is really, really important aspect of this. Like, what kind of stories are going through our head at the moment? And while they may seem convincing, are they actually real and valid?
No, and I really appreciate you sharing that part of your story. Loren and I, just some background, we met a couple of years ago. We actually shared a WeWork office years ago in Sydney before we both moved to the United States. And I think the power of you sharing your story, and we don't have time to go into it now, but I think you sort of touched on it there, that as a family and as an individual and as a professional, you went through enormous upheaval, the lowest of lows, and yet you're grateful for that experience now because you know that it's led you to where you are. So can you talk a little bit about how you've kind of gone through that process of being able to reframe that most awful experience in your family's life to kind of where it's led you to now?
Yeah, if we look at any human story, right, there are always peaks and troughs. And if we look at nature always ebbs and flows. And so if we can buy into this illusion that, things are always going to move on a linear path upwards, they don't. I mean, look at what the economy does as well. And so if we can accept that those troughs are required in order for us to create our next peak, then we can start to learn to ride the wave of life. And so for me, it was always a question of like, in some respects, I feel like I'm seeing a full circle come around. With what I experienced in 2011, I can see that it's happening again on a collective planetary level this time around. And the great thing for me to have been able to reflect on is that how much I've grown from the experience, how much this time around I feel a much greater sense of calm, how because I've done a lot of the self-development and mindset work, I'm not anxiety ridden like I was the first time around. The first time around, I was like losing my hair, losing weight, everything, right? I genuinely thought it was the end of the world. So in hindsight, in order for me to stand here today in a place where I feel like my business is doing well, my family is doing well, we couldn't have gotten here if it wasn't for the experience that we had in 2011. So I look back at that period of time, and despite the fact that I had my greatest challenges at that period of time, I would never take them away because they've made me who I am today. And that, in some respects, if we view it from one lens, that level of growth is only something that can serve us time and time and time again in our life. If we've come through it once, we can come through it again. If we have learned how to make money in a trough or to how to survive in a trough, the great thing is when the peak comes our way, we'll be really, really ready for it. So there's a ton of opportunity that's available here, even in the midst of a lot of suffering, even in the midst of a lot of challenge for a lot of people. But I'm also a massive believer that the human experience is one of having to go through our own challenges in order to realize how resilient and powerful we are. So we can't take that away from anyone. We can't take that away from someone that's supposed to have this experience because, if we reflect on our own life, many of us have been through challenges and they've made us resilient. So can we take that away and say oh, I wish that wasn't happening to you if it's going to be the best gift that comes your way? I don't think so. So it's, we have to look at it from multiple angles, even though when we're in the midst of it, it's really, really, really hard to do so.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's kind of like that concept when they say, that idea of being a helicopter parent, and I don't have children, but from what I understand, when you're a helicopter parent, you're kind of always solving your children's problems, but actually at some point they need to fail and they need to hit rock bottom and they need to build themselves up on their own. So I can kind of see some synergies between what you're saying and that analogy as well. For people, you mentioned that you did a lot of work and that you've had a lot of growth in the past 10 years. So for people who are at the start of that kind of growth journey in moving towards a more abundant mindset and finding opportunities even in kind of dark times like the world's experiencing now, what are some really practical things that people can do right now or tomorrow? So you mentioned routine and making a choice every day, prioritizing good things. Are there any other practical things that people can, take away from this talk and put into practice today?
Completely. I think it's really, really important to find a group of people that have a high energy, that are not going to bring you down, especially if you're currently surrounded by, I don't know about you, but when I go out, the energy is not great out there. It's doom and gloom, right? So what's really beautiful is that a lot of virtual coffee meetups are happening at the moment for people to come together. So that's a free way that we can catch up with one another, share our experiences collectively, and come together and pull our heads together and get creative around how we're going to navigate these times. So that's one really easy way to do it. There's a ton of them popping up at the moment. If you can't find one yourself, start one. There's no rules, right? So like if you're not seeing it, then just be the leader when it comes to that. The next piece around this is, for me, I'm a massive believer that we're not designed to do this on our own. We're human. And so we have to, you and I have talked about this extensively, we need to surround ourselves with people that can facilitate that journey for us. So back when I started, back in 2011, I didn't realize that I was suffering from, some form of like trauma and mental health issues. And so my boss at the time when I was working at the law firm recommended that I go see a psychologist because he had also lost his daughter. And so it never popped into my mind that that was actually something that I should or could do. And so that's how my self-development journey began, because I started seeing a psychologist. She helped me. It was really helpful to have an observer from the outside look in on my circumstances. This could be a therapist, this could be a coach, whatever it is, a healer. And that was how I got into the journey of firstly starting to recognize that I'm not my emotions. I am not the stories that I'm telling myself. And it just allowed me breathing space to realize that, so that I could start to recreate myself, because it felt like I had hit rock bottom. So yeah, those are some recommendations.
Love that. And actually the way that we met was, it was through the office space that we shared, but you then brought me very kindly into a group of women entrepreneurs who, I'm still in contact with every day now. And we've kind of formed our own little support crew a couple of years ago that is still maintained today. And I think, honestly, I don't know about you, but like I would not have been able to make the leaps of faith that I did, or make the growth in revenue, or hire staff, or expand into some of our Fortune 500 clients had it not been for the support of that group. So that really resonates with me when you talk about the power of that group and community around you. One other thing, Loren, just before we wrap up, one of the things that you've taught me is the power of understanding and finding your zone of genius, which I'm going to guess is linked to abundance as well. But can you just, for people who are not familiar with that term or phrase that you've coined, can you just kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, so when I think of zone of genius, I think of it as this unique pot of ingredients that is uniquely you. And so it could be the skills that you've acquired over the course of your lifetime, the lessons you've learned, the experiences that you've had on this like journey of life. It could be the things that you have learned formally or informally. It's a particular energy that you have, personality traits. When we wrap all of that up, that is your unique zone of genius. And so what happens, and what has happened, and what many people are currently experiencing, is that they might be losing a job that they never even really liked to begin with, but there's still grief and loss associated with it, right? And so what this actually is the perfect opportunity for us to take stock and be like, is this actually what I want to be doing? Like, for example, like I was a litigation lawyer for a number of years, and it wasn't until I had that catalyst event that I really called that into question and asked myself, is this how I want to be living my life? Is this the best use of my resources and time? And in the 5 years since then, I actually realized I want to be helping people on a human behavioral level, serving them and being able to have flexibility running my own business. So I went and did that. And so I think there's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I just like, it's funny for me to hear you say that you used to be a litigation lawyer, because it's like so contrary to how I know you to be and what I know you love doing. So we're going to wrap it up for Instagram Live, and we're going to just finalize a couple of final questions on the Zoom call. But if you're joining us on Instagram, you can follow Loren at Loren Trlin. She has an amazing community that I'd highly recommend you join. So we'll be back tomorrow on Instagram for the Daily Power Pep Talk. So thank you to Loren Trlin for joining us, and we're going to wrap up on the Zoom call in a minute as well. So thank you to our Instagram community. Whoops. That went well. Zoom team. Great. Oh, okay. It doesn't want to let me end the Instagram Live, but that's fine. So big thank you to the Zoom community who have joined us today as well. Loren, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to people about you know, some of the programs that you're running and people who kind of are looking to find more abundance and really move into that zone of genius? Like, obviously you've got a lot of content online, but I know you run courses as well. Is there anything that you kind of wanted to talk everyone through from that perspective?
Yeah, so for me, the fundamental pinnacles of, you know, creating our definition of abundance, finding a vehicle that works for you, whether that be your work or a business. So I do a lot of business coaching, helping startup founders and people that want to get into business launch their business and grow it, because I think that's a powerful tool for creating abundance and freedom in our life. So I assist a lot of people with that. But then on the other side of it, I also focus on mindset and abundance, because I'm a firm believer that 90% of our success comes from what we're thinking. And so I also have courses, one of them is called The Abundant Alchemist, which is all around shifting our mindset so that we can transform our life. So it's I think part of what I love to do is make all of this as practical as possible, take like any sort of like airiness out of it and make it very like strategic on a day-to-day basis as to how we can apply it in our life. So the way that I help people is either, you know, that mindset is the piece that you want to start in, or you know that business is the place where you want to start. Regardless, I've got online courses and programs for both of them. So if anyone knows that like now is the time for them to really firstly step into their leadership of what it's going to look like for them in their life, and they know that they're either ready to run a business or to grow one online, then they're very welcome to get in touch with me. I love this stuff. It really, really lights me up. I get super excited when someone wants to.
But it's great because I think like your passion really shines through. And like so the group that I talked about earlier, the group that we're in, we have like this Facebook group. It's called The Coven. I don't know why it's called that, but it is. And there's probably about 8 of us on there. And I think I actually did this. I think the other day I was like, hey, like, what a disaster. How's everyone going? Or something like that. It was very negative. I have to be honest. I didn't feel that negative, but I guess I was just projecting and assuming that everyone would be feeling negative. And like 1 or 2 of the women wrote back and they're like, yeah, like this sucks, or like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? And Loren was like, no, this is amazing. Like, what an opportunity. Who's feeling amazing? Who's feeling fabulous? And I was like, what? Fabulous? Who's feeling fabulous during a global pandemic? And then I realized that it's like, that's your MO, right? And you're choosing to make that choice every single minute.
It's a very deliberate choice. It's not, I can't see the reality of what's unfolding. I'm very much tuned into it, but it's also, we all have choices, right? And so it's a very deliberate choice as to like the story that we get to tell ourselves. And I want to be the example of that, because we can't all be doom and gloom. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of this hole together.
Yeah, and so I need to thank you because you really wrenched me out of whatever sort of momentary negative lapse I was in. Yeah. As I said, in my head, I didn't think I was being that negative, but when you were so positive, it made me reflect that actually my behavior was not coming from a positive place, and it could be, you know. And actually, for us at PepTalkHer, like, we're so fortunate in that, you know, I'm similar to you. I built this business because I wanted to have choice and I wanted to have geographic freedom, and my team works remotely anyway. And what a blessing that I'm able to continue to do the work that we do from quarantine here in Australia instead of my apartment in New York where I would typically be. So lots of positives to come from this. So I want to thank you, Loren, because you've really helped me shift my mindset just through being friends with you and being in your community. So I'm just thrilled that we're able to bring this to the PepTalkHer community. And I think that you're doing great work in the world, and I'm glad you're not a litigation lawyer anymore.
I know, same, right? And that was a really smart move by Loren from 5 years ago. And so we have to honor ourselves, because we're going to make some really smart decisions now in the next coming months, like for anyone that's listening to this. And recognize like how capable you are, how resilient you are. I have this motto. I'm like, this is not my first rodeo. And I keep saying that. I'm like, this is not my first rodeo. Like, I've got this. We got this. Yeah,
you've got this. No, I love that. That's awesome. Well, listen, you can check out Loren's work, lorentrlin.com. She actually also has a podcast, and sometimes it's like, oh, everyone has a podcast. It's a bit annoying. But I'm pretty harsh because I used to be a journalist, and I can tell you Loren's podcast is excellent. I remember when I rang you after I listened to it, I was like, I'm trying to be harsh because I want to give you constructive feedback. And I was like, I have no constructive feedback. I think it's excellent. It's a really excellent podcast. So you can download that as well. Otherwise you can head to Loren Trlin, TRLIN.com.
Yeah. Plenty of free resources. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me personally. I'm happy to answer them, send you in the right direction, because we're all in this together. We really are.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us on the Daily Pep Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Loren. And to anyone who's still listening, if you have a chance to jump into the comments and just kind of let us know how you heard about the Daily Pep Talk, that would be super helpful for us just in terms of our research. And if you have topics you wish that we would cover, or if you have people that you think we should talk to who are as amazing and who has similar epic wisdom nuggets that they should be sharing, please let me know either on Instagram at PepTalkHer, or you can send me an email, hello@PepTalkHer.com. And we'll be back same time tomorrow for another Daily Power Pep Talk. Thanks, Loren.
Thank you. You guys have the best day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Ciao.
Yeah.